On this week's episode of the Steam Deck podcast, we're talking about SteamOS compatibility and the trouble with Doom the Dark Ages on deck. What's up, Internet? You're tuning to this week's episode of the Steam Deck podcast, Slipscreen Games' weekly gaming podcast all about Valve's portable PC powerhouse, the Steam Deck. I'm your host, Pete and Bessie, joined today by my very good friend and co-host, Mr. Max Wright.
Ahoy, ahoy.
Full steam ahead, brother.
Full steam ahead.
Speaking of which, we got an interesting one today. We got SteamOS Compatibility officially being announced, which is, of course, a new separate check system from Steam Deck compatibility. And this is for you to, kind of coming ahead of all of those non-deck devices that will be able to run SteamOS, right? Like, obviously, we talked about it a couple weeks ago, that the first one that's going to get it is the Lenovo Legion Go. We talked...
Legion Go S.
Oh, yeah. S, right. And we talked just like last week about, like, obviously there's going to be the new ROG Ally 2 around the corner that should support SteamOS as well. So this seems to be just kind of the next domino in setting the stage for all of these non-deck devices to start taking advantage of some of the features that we all have come to expect on SteamOS.
Yes, it's interesting that it is separate because I think it doesn't matter. So the current Steam Deck, if the game doesn't run well, like Returnal, for example, doesn't run well on deck and therefore is unsupported, specifically because you won't get good enough performance on this to be able to run it. Whereas with this, it would say, yeah, it would run on SteamOS, but you'd need more powerful hardware to run it. There's a few more things on here, I guess, that maybe the compatibility, the Steam verification doesn't quite cover. So this has three options listed here where it uses Portal 2 as an example. It says that it successfully runs on SteamOS with a tick, good. Then it's got two sort of eyes.
Like the eye, like information, icon.
Yeah. It says this game's first time start requires an active internet connection, and this game's launcher or setup tool may require touchscreen or mouse input. I don't know how much of that is actually true for Portal 2, but I think that's just an example that's been given. So it gives you more information, I guess, when you're downloading a game, if you can just run it as normal, or if there's going to be a bit of, extra layers involved. If you were running SteamOS on more of a controller-based system, like let's say it's on docked to a TV, or it's a home theater PC, or it's not necessarily the Steam Deck or an equivalent, you might be put off playing that game because you're like, oh, I need to use a touchscreen or a mouse input when that I don't want that. I want just the normal console experience.
I feel like the space where this is even more useful is for online games, right? Like Steve always brings up how there are a number of popular online games that you just can't play on Linux because anti-cheat isn't supported, right? So I think that's the kind of thing that I think if you're a new Linux user that you'd probably want to know, because if you maybe your device is powerful enough to say play GTA Online or Destiny 2 or whatever, but it's not allowed, it's not compatible with SteamOS, and it has nothing to do with your hardware. That is a distinction worth making so that you don't spin yourself out trying to figure out why it won't run when the answer is just it's not supported.
Yeah, and a lot of these things are what's included in Proton DB. So while Proton DB does have specifically for the Steam Deck, if you run this game at this settings, you'll be able to get 30, 40 FPS, whatever. It does also have a more generic, does this run on Linux? Is Proton compatible with this? And this sort of takes out you having to go to a third-party site or you having to get a CSS loader to get the compatibility tabs taken out so you can replace them with the Proton DB. For people that aren't like us who don't mind messing around with things like Decky, people who just want to use their Steam Deck or SteamOS device as it comes out the box, this will take that away from that kind of stress, because there's a lot of games, so it's you never quite know sometimes whether the game you think might run absolutely fine might not run at all because it's just slightly too old, and you don't know that because you're not in the ecosystem like that. But
right,
it makes it easier.
Yeah, and I think if you want these products to be accessible, that's the kind of thing you want to take off of the users. Not make it their responsibility to have to figure out whether or not the thing they're about to buy is going to run, right? That's, I think, kind of an unreasonable expectation, honestly, you know? And I think, like, those are the kind of things that I think sometimes intimidate people away from PC gaming when it's really not. It doesn't need to be that complicated. Like, if you are willing to take a few steps and utilize tools like Proton DB, then, like, you can kind of demystify some of those things. But to your point, there are a lot of folks, and this is a thing we hear all the time from the Steam Deck community, right? Is that, like, well, yeah, like, I only have a couple hours a day to play games. I don't want to spend time troubleshooting a plugin from SteamDB to see if my stuff's going to run. I don't want to have to watch a YouTube video and figure out what the settings I need are going to be. I want to know if it's going to run and play it, right? And, like, that's how I want to be using my time. So, yeah, I think the more of this stuff that you can bake in at the, system level, the better the user experience is.
Yeah, I think it also, if SteamOS is going to become more of a, you can just download an installer, run it, and install it on any sort of hardware. Let's say my computer, I wanted to try using Linux instead of Windows for a bit, because I have been fed up with Windows recently, just having to be logged in. There's always, like, things running in the background. It updates in the middle of doing stuff. I spent ages setting up my start menu to have all the shortcuts I need in folders and stuff. And it just wiped it. So I'm fed up with it. Maybe I want to try Linux instead. Let's think about that. What am I trying to say? If I see this tick here and it says, yes, SteamOS compatible, all I need to do is go onto Steam and look at the requirements, the hardware requirements. And I know that instead of having to work out, like, is the Steam Deck an equivalent to what's on here? Is it going to run on the Steam Deck or on my hardware? Because I know that it does run on the on SteamOS. I'm really fumbling this. Because it does, I know it runs on SteamOS. I can just, like I do on Windows now, look at my hardware and go, yeah, that's going to run fine. I don't have to worry about that. All good. I don't have to go to Proton DB because I know, one, it works here, and two, I've got the hardware to run it. We're all good. So that would take a layer out for me. I would quite like them to sort of do a full SteamOS installer soon, because I was messing around with Bazart recently and having some problems, and it would be good to be able to test using SteamOS as my main gaming OS, just to have, like, a full Linux gaming PC to see if all the benefits of, like, not having to run Windows processes in the background, not having to mess around with Windows licenses and things like that. I'll still probably try and keep Windows around for work, but I would like to be able to treat my PC as a games console. I'd also lose Games Pass though, which is a bummer, but I'd have to weigh up the pros and cons and see if it's worth it performance wise, speed wise, and just, like, booting straight into game mode, all those things.
Yeah, I wish that we had a better, like, timeline of what, like, the full launcher, or even if that's, like, still a plan, because it really seemed like that was something we were moving towards, and we just haven't really seen it come to fruition. But I would like to experiment with that a little bit more. I think even if I didn't do it for my main rig, just because, like, there are a lot of programs that we use here that, like, are not compatible with Linux, at least not yet, and would just be, I think, more trouble than it's worth to try to find alternatives. Whereas, I would be very interested in running, like, a SteamOS, like, set-top box that exists as, like, a, living room, like, console PC that I can, stream from my primary rig if I need to in big picture mode. Like, that, I think, would be really great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've been considering this recently, just the, like, making a small console, but I would want it to be powerful enough that means if I'm going to do it, it needs to be powerful enough that I don't just end up then just streaming from my PC anyway.
Right.
Because then what's the point of me going through the effort of putting that together? But it does. I've seen these little small form factor builds, ITX motherboards, little cases with handles that would fit in, like like, say, set top box size. It does seem like a fun project to do, and I think something like Bazart does make that really easy to just have. You boot in straight into console mode. It's like, this is like a console, but it runs your Steam games. That's great. But I would like the official Steam one, just because it'd be nice to actually have the. I mean, I guess it doesn't really matter, does it? Linux is Linux, and it's just doesn't necessarily matter that it's come from Steam, especially if they're going to be maintaining it to keep feature parity with Steam.
That's a good point. Something else I was thinking about that, like, I think is another potential benefit of this as like a feature set is that, like, as we have more SteamOS compatible devices, like, there will in theory come a point where you can have something that's OS verified that isn't deck verified because of like power differential.
Yeah. I would think. Yeah, like, I mean, Returnal is probably a good example, like I used earlier. If I was to put SteamOS on my computer, it would probably say, yeah, this is SteamOS compatible. I could play that game. But on the Steam Deck, it would still say unverified because it
right, because like those issues that you're talking about, like if it is like, oh, you need an internet connection and you need like the touchscreen and mouse input, it's like, well, I have a mouse input, so it's fine, right? Like,
yes, yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, that would be I guess it would be nice if this could differentiate whether you're on a handheld or a desktop as well. Because if you go through the process of setting up, you can, in theory, get Flash SteamOS onto. As long as you've got AMD hardware, you can flash it on, but it thinks it's a Steam Deck. It thinks it's a handheld. If it could differentiate between this is a handheld device using an APU, or this is, I can tell you've got a separate CPU, separate GPU, you have a full desktop build, you're using a mouse and keyboard. If it gave you like a different setup screen, different warnings and things like that. But I am asking a lot here of something that it doesn't exist yet, you know. But that would be handy, I think, to be able, because then, you know, you don't have to be reminded that you're doing something against the grain. You know, you want it to feel like, you know, it's part of, you know, you're using a computer. You should get the computer benefits. You know, not like,
right.
Oh, it thinks I'm on a handheld, but it's not. Like almost like you're emulating a mobile device. You know.
Right. Yeah. And it would be nice if you could differentiate between those things and just like try to build out the unique experience of using SteamOS on a desktop as its own thing, you know? Hopefully that's where we're going, because I really think if they could come up with like, you know, similar to what, oh gosh, the name of it is escaping me right now. What's the program that creates the compatibility layer between Windows game? Proton. Thank you.
Proton.
Yeah, because I was just thinking Proton DB, and I'm like, that's not it. But yes, it is. If you could come up with a like a similar compatibility layer for just like any essential Windows program, that would be enough for me. I would never look back. Like if I could use that for like Adobe or whatever, right? And like, you know.
So in theory, you can. It's just not that easy. Also, I'm pretty sure. Now, this is where I'm going to be slightly out of my depth, but I'm pretty sure Proton is based on Wine, and that there is, if you were to use Wine Tricks, or I guess, I don't know if Lutris and Bottles are just for games or whatever, but there are programs that you can, create that's a container which has,
maybe that's something that just, you can use, I don't know how to do it yet.
So to install, like, let's say I wanted to install the Ubisoft launcher, you'd have to add the executable for the installer as a non-Steam game, and then say you want to run that with Proton. It then creates the Windows file structure inside like a Proton compatibility folder inside your Steam, where all the files are stored on Steam. I can't think of the word.
Your library?
No, not even your library. Just in the file structure somewhere. I don't know. And then you install it there, but then you have to repoint the shortcut you've made, because if you delete that shortcut, you delete that fork,
right?
That space you created, and it just all disappears anyway. So you need to repoint what you've made there at the actual launcher. It's so complicated, and then you run it through that to make it work. It's complicated, but it does work. But it's not as easy as, I want to run this with Proton and that works. You have to run the installer and then make it point at the thing that's in the launcher that's inside there, and it's a ball ache, and it's not something that the average person could do quite easily. I did it for someone I worked with recently. They wanted to play The Legend of Korra, and I was like, and I'd forgotten the step that if you delete the setup exe from Steam, it deletes the whole thing. So I did it 4 times, and I was like, why do I keep losing the launcher every time I go to run the game? It just keeps disappearing, because I was forgetting that crucial step that you sort of need. So it's not intuitive at all. Although there is that you can run a command that is basically just like install the non-Steam launchers, and you can pick from a list of what you want, and then it will add them all to Steam for you, which seems to work really well. I don't know how well that would work, or how easy it is to keep them all updated, but yeah.
I think it's also probably worth like considering that when we get to a point where there is a general release, I guess I should maybe say if there's a general release for SteamOS, that like I think a lot of these features and things that we're interested in will like come in time as the community develops solutions for them, you know?
Mm-hmm. Sorry, can you repeat that?
Yeah. Here, let me just make it.
I was like active listening, but not actually listening. Apparently, I was reading, looking at the notes, and not actually.
Let me make a note here, and I'll cut around.
Sorry.
It's okay. So, you good?
Yeah, go on.
Okay. I think the other thing that's worth considering is that like a lot of these features that we are interested in will probably become available over time after there is a general release, or maybe I should say if there's a general release of SteamOS, because the community will come up with solutions for them, right? Like that's so much of what we enjoy about SteamOS is functionality that the community came up with first and then became part of the experience.
Yeah, we've seen like there are so many things now that like if I was to download Decky now, I'd probably be more I'd be less enthused, or less of like a necessary thing, because a lot of the features that I would have wanted from Decky are sort of in SteamOS now. I think we're probably going to see even more of that. It's just like the CSS stuff that's really nice to be able to edit stuff. Just little tweaks and changes, but not like core functionality. Like Power Tools is useless now, as far as I'm concerned.
I think there was a time where I would recommend any deck user go and download those tools, and now so many of those things are just like native things that you can take advantage of and not ever have to think about going and installing third-party plugins, which, to your point, it's not that they have no use, but I think they have a much less wide use case than they used to.
Yes, I agree. It's very like, it's for power users again.
Yeah,
instead of like, oh, you want to be able to emulate, you need Power Tools to be able to, change the TDP or whatever it was, the cores. I can't remember what it was now. The cores and threads to be able to run GameCube games properly. I don't know.
Yeah,
can't remember. Steve did a video on it.
Yeah, it was a whole thing. It used to take a lot more setup than now. It's very plug and play again.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's always the thing to keep in mind, is that I think if there is something like that, like I would imagine if we get to a point where people are trying to use SteamOS as their desktop PC, that there will be people like me who are like, well, let's create a plug-and-play compatibility layer for Adobe Creative Cloud or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And again, which honestly might exist, and we just are not aware of it because we haven't tried to do it. But every time it's come up, nobody's been like, you're an idiot, this is how you do it. So my guess is that it's probably not a thing.
Yeah, I'd reckon there's got to be a wine tricks thing for it. I will say that... I don't know if you can still hear me.
I'm listening.
Sorry,
I'm listening.
Okay, good. Sorry.
I closed my window, everybody.
yeah. I will say that, like I said earlier about recognizing what device you're on, it would be nice if it could tell that it was plugged in to a permanent power supply, not like a battery that's on charge. Because I'm pretty sure that it would currently say battery full or whatever. I don't need that. I don't need to know that information. There's no need for me to do that. Which also actually... You speaking about functionality being added into, Power Tools, you used to be able to set how much charge you get in your Steam Deck and where it stops charging. And they've added that in now to like a new update. So you can set your deck's maximum charge to be like 80%. I think you can do 80% or 90% or whatever. So if it's plugged in for a long time or it's docked for a long time, it doesn't... doesn't sit at 100% and degrade your battery life. Now, as far as I know, it actually can do pass-through power, so it doesn't actually necessarily charge the battery constantly. I think it just
so this is slightly different than that. This is like a really, really useful feature. Because like to your point, right? Like the pass-through thing is like not as much of an issue as it used to be, it's not an issue at all in the way it used to be. But what this setting does is that when you set your maximum charge to 80, it preserves the overall life of your battery, like over a longer period of time.
Yeah.
Like, this is a setting that a lot of smart phones and like wearable tech and stuff like that have, and like I have this enabled on all of my chargeable devices that have it, and it really, really does greatly increase the overall longevity of your battery.
Yeah.
I charge my phone like every 2 days. I charge my watch every 2 days rather than every night, because of this functionality. And the batteries just haven't degraded the same way that they normally do.
Yeah, I probably screwed mine up then because this is not a feature I use.
Definitely worth it.
Yeah, it's interesting that there's an entire new power menu. You go into the settings. There's now a whole section for power that's just for this, and I wonder if there is going to be stuff for controls like, I guess, sort of like TDP controls, I guess, but more similar to how the ROG Ally has like its different modes, where it's like, yeah, I'm on quiet mode, I'm on power mode, I'm on like max mode or whatever. If you could go into the power settings that they've given you there, and if you're on a device like a PC that is plugged in all the time, and therefore you always want it whacked up at the max, or if you want to maybe save money on electricity, you want to whack it down a bit, or maybe make it quieter or cooler or whatever. If you're able to have that in a power menu instead of just like, oh, I'll quickly per game change to TDP kind of thing. I wonder if that's functionality we're going to see soon.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if you end up getting more granular control over time. That seems to be how a lot of these systems end up working, right? Like that you start with like a base level of feature set, and then they start to give you more bells and whistles as people make requests like that of like, oh, it would be great if it could do this. Great, then it will. But yeah, just for anybody out there who was like not aware of this functionality, or like maybe like Max hasn't used it on other devices, I would highly recommend going and enabling this. And you can disenable it if there's a period where like maybe you're going to get on a plane and you won't have a charger and you want that extra 20%. Great. But just as like a baseline when you're at home and you're charging your devices regularly, this is a really good function for you to take advantage of to just extend the longevity of your battery.
Can you do it? Oh, actually, I do have a smart charging mode on, so it charges steadily overnight to preserve long-term battery health. So I guess my phone doesn't charge all the way up, but if it's overnight, it charges it slowly until. So when I wake up, I've got 100%.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
And there is a custom charging mode. Set the maximum charging limit between 70 and 90 to protect battery life. Okay, this is fun.
Yeah, it's worth doing. It definitely is. It makes quite a big difference in terms of just your overall how efficient your battery remains over a longer period of time. And I think with something like the Steam Deck, that's obviously pretty important. Like you don't want to have to go through the trouble of like replacing the battery or something because you drained it too much too quickly.
I wish I knew what
my base Steam Deck has that problem a little bit, where like it'll from a full charge after a few minutes it'll drop down to like in the 80s.
Oh wow, okay.
And like it holds a decent charge after that point, but it's like it can't really ever be fully charged. It just goes so quick.
Yeah. So, is there an easy way of seeing your battery health?
I don't know. That's a question for another episode, I guess.
That is a question for another episode.
Well, you take a look at that, and while you do that, I'm going to let the folks get a word from our sponsors. This episode was made with support from listeners like you on patreon.com/flipscreengames. If you enjoy our podcast, supporting us on Patreon will help us spend more time making content and get you access to Patreon-exclusive perks like early access to ad-free versions of all of our podcasts, and exclusive content like the twice-monthly After Dark podcast, where Steve and I will share funny personal stories, play games with each other, and more. And my daily Patreon show, The Daily Checkpoint, where every day I'll spend at least 10 minutes answering your questions or sharing my off-the-cuff thoughts on what I'm playing and what's going on in the video games industry. If you like what we do and want to go above and beyond to show your support, head over to patreon.com/flipscreengames today. And we're back. So let's talk about compatibility a little bit here, because I think, unfortunately, a kind of a frustratingly common story this year, but with a new angle, a new disappointing angle, though, unfortunately. Doom: The Dark Ages is the kind of latest big AAA game that is struggling to run on deck, but it's unique because it actually got a specific patch to make it deck compatible, and the performance is just really still not there.
Well, so it wasn't that the game was patched to run on the Steam Deck. It was that the Steam Deck was patched.
Sorry, Steam Deck got an overall patch.
So it's not like they were like, oh, we want to play, we need Steam Deck users to play this. It was that Valve were like, oh, there was an issue they've reported to us that we've had to fix to get the game to run.
Yeah,
But
so specifically, we got an update to Preview Branch 3.7.6 that addressed that specific issue, and it was like through the entire review period, right? The game was not playable on deck, and now it is, but the performance is definitely leaving something to be desired, especially for a game like Doom.
yeah, I saw. So yeah, so just for context, if you haven't, are not really aware of Doom or you haven't played Doom on deck before, Doom and Doom Eternal run phenomenally. Doom Eternal as a 2020 game, you can run it maxed out like 60 FPS. I'm pretty sure you can probably run it at 90. It just runs flawlessly, and it's for a fast-paced like shooter like that. It's really impressive. Sure, if you max it out, you're going to drain your battery, and it's going to be quite loud and hot. But it runs so well that I think people were just expecting this to just be the same. But I think the recommended specs came out a little while ago, and people were like, "This is higher than we expected," and it seems to be that we are struggling a bit here. I saw Overkill, our friends over at Overkill, posted earlier saying that Doom, the Dark Ages, if you run at FSR performance mode on Steam Deck, which is 400p, you can get a reasonably steady 30 to 40 FPS. So you're basically running it like the lowest setting possible. This is like as low as the Switch would run Doom 2016, 400p, possibly even less than that. And that's at like FSR performance. So it's going to look crap. It's not going to look good. It's not going to, and you're only getting 30 FPS. It's like, is it worth it at that point if you're playing a game that is meant to be played on like powerful hardware? Same with we've seen a couple of other examples this year, both Game Pass games, Oblivion and Clair Obscur, which are the main point of Oblivion Remastered is the visuals. It looks amazing, but to play it on Steam Deck, you have to strip all that away, so that doesn't really count. And Clair Obscur is a gorgeous, 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 gorgeous game that you have to destroy and to be able to make it work on the Steam Deck. And it's a shame.
It is. This one I think stings especially bad, considering that they're like, oh, like there's this update that'll fix the problem, and it's like, but it still doesn't. And
it's like, Doom doesn't work. All the Doom games work, so here's a little patch. No.
And to your point, right? Like id famous for being able to get very, very performant games to run on underpowered tech. Right, like it's literally a meme that you can run Doom on anything. Right, like
I'm pretty sure that it's the same engine as well. I'm not 100% sure on that, but it reminds me of how Resident Evil Village played so flawlessly on the Steam Deck. I played it on Steam Deck and was like, God, this is amazing. It was like the first switch moment for me of like, I can run this on here and I can run it on my PC and it looks amazing no matter where I play it, and I'm really happy with that. And then Dragon's Dogma 2 and Monster Hunter Wilds come out on the same engine, and they barely run on anything, let alone on the Steam Deck. It's like what is different between these two? And I think it's the same with Doom here. What happened that it doesn't run? Granted, it's not its fault necessarily. It is also just we are on aging hardware.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, right? Like Doom Eternal was a game that ran on deck well, but that game's also 5 years old. Right? It's like, I mean, and if you're comparing it to 2016, that's nearly a 10-year-old game now, right? I think it's the ravages of time affect us all, including video game hardware.
And it is interesting that all three of the games we're talking about are Game Pass games as well. So even if you did want to play them on Steam Deck, and this is only over the course of a month, 2 months, a month. I'm gonna say it's been a month since all of these games came.
I'd say the last 6 months probably, because like there has been like one or two big AAA releases that.
All right. So let's say it's 6 months. Then you've paid $60.
Yeah.
Versus you'd have to pay $70 just to play Doom Eternal here. So if you're playing it on Steam Deck, not only are you getting worse performance to a point where it's like, is it worth playing? You're also paying more for the privilege. And it's a shame. It's lucky that we have other places to play. And I also would like to just very much clarify, I love the Steam Deck, and if anyone else said anything bad about the Steam Deck, I'd fight them. But I do think it is a shame that I can't just have the sort of like, oh, I'll play some of that on the Steam Deck, I'll play some of it on here, and I'm getting to the point now where the games that I'm wanting to play, I'm really excited about Clair Obscur at the moment, and I am at work on a lunch break or whatever, like itching to play it, and I can't just pull out the deck and play it. I'm like, I have to get home. I have to wait till I get home. I can't fit a little hour in here and there. I have to sit down here once I've done everything I need to do at home. And it reminds me of, console gaming again, I guess.
I mean, that game's a perfect example of a game I would have 100% rather played on deck, right? Like, I would love to have that available on a handheld. And I think Oblivion in a similar way of like, I think for somebody like Steve, right, who's like played it before and it's like, oh, I'm just walking down memory lane.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's exactly the kind of thing you'd love to be able to like be like, oh yeah, I played a little bit up, downstairs. I'm going up for the night. I'll chip away at, bullshit tasks in the open world or whatever, right? I'll go in the arena. I'll go, farm experience points or whatever. And it's a bummer. Like it's definitely been a shame to see deck users not be able to enjoy games that would otherwise be very at home on the device.
Mm-hmm.
There've been a couple games that I think really, really would be great on handheld, and there just isn't a great option unless you are, taking advantage of like Moonlight or something like that and streaming it. But at that point, to the example you gave of like being at work or something like that, that's not going to serve your needs, right?
Yeah, I've recently gone through the effort of putting Tailscale on my Steam Deck and on my computer. Excuse me, here, so I can. Excuse me.
Ooh, you okay?
Can quite easily. I said something that's right. Can quite easily stream over the internet now. My internet upload speed here is now fantastic. I can do that.
Nice.
It just requires me being somewhere with a good download speed.
Right. You need a good connection on both ends.
Yeah, exactly. And like the office isn't really a place for that. Whereas, it would be nice to be able to pull it out and play a little bit of it. Also, I just want to say that this isn't a Steam Deck, specifically a Steam Deck issue, I don't think. Like, I'm pretty sure these games don't run that well on other Windows handhelds as well. You do have the benefit of Game Pass there, but it's not like the Steam Deck. It's not like it's just Steam Deck users that are losing out here. It is just games are outperforming the hardware faster than the handheld hardware is going up.
Yeah.
When you think back to,
no, go ahead, finish that.
I was going to say, when I think back to 2020, when I first got the PS5, and I remember thinking, wow, this is like some of the best stuff I've ever seen in my life. Returnal looks incredible, and Demon's Souls looks incredible. Like, this is amazing. This looks better than PC games I've been playing at the moment. And then 5 years down the line, now I'm sort of I played Returnal again on PC this year. I was like, wow, that looks amazing. I forgot how amazing it looked. But then to find out that actually this has ray tracing modes that it doesn't have on the PS5, and it has like particle effects that the PS5 doesn't have. And then when they announced the PS5 Pro patch, I was like, oh, great, PS5 Pro users get to enjoy what I enjoyed on PC. Only to find out that no, it's just a resolution bump. They don't have all the particle effects and the ray tracing stuff like that. So now this is a long in the tooth point, but now PC hardware has once again surpassed. But also, the new generation of cars has just come out. A lot of new stuff's happening. So we're back at the point where PC's on top again. We're back at the point where PC's on top again. I'm sure when the console generation wraps back around, and eventually I'll be saying the same thing again. I'll be like, wow.
That's always the thing, right? It's like there is that ping pong effect where it's like the new benchmark comes out, and then you think about it though. You're talking about 2020. That's 5 years ago. Like that is a long time in terms of PC parts. That's a long time in terms of of development, right? Like
we're like 2 years away from new consoles, So
right, exactly. And I'm sure there will be a moment where there's a dialogue about look at these new benchmarks and how impressive they are, and then 2-3 years in, you'll be like, oh, this new thing though, right? Like it's just how it is, and I think that's the interesting thing with like the handheld PC form factor is that like I think if you are a PC gamer, like you're used to being able to have that modular approach, right? And being like, if there is this new cutting edge, piece of tech that's really going to bring your rig to the next level, you could get it and upgrade it. Whereas like us having an established form factor in the deck or the Ally or the Legion Go or whatever, right? Like they are, stuck on that console cycle, right? Where it's like, and granted, some of the other folks like release them at a more quick clip, right? Like there's a new INEO device every year, right? Like that kind of thing. But if you're a Steam Deck user, right, like us, then I mean, we're in a console generation, and I think the Steam Deck is now kind of in the same place in the arc that the Nintendo Switch was like a year ago, where it's like, okay, like you can't necessarily expect the new hotness to be something that's going to be available there day and date, and you are looking forward to what comes next if that is something that's important to you, right? If you're somebody that wants to be playing AAA games on your Steam Deck, I mean, now's probably not the time to do that, right? But like, I think we'll have another, whether it's next year, whether it's 2 years from now, when we do get our look at Steam Deck 2, there'll be a probably 2 or 3 year period where you can play every AAA game on it, and you'll be like, oh my God, and and we'll go through this song and dance all over again.
It also does, it's being highlighted by the fact that AAA games or even AA games like are having a moment right now, whereas the last couple of years have been best games of the year have been some of the best games of the year have been indie games. Some of my favorite games of the year have been new indie releases, and this year there have been some killer indie releases, but we're also just like bang, bang, bang. Here's a AAA banger. Here's a AAA banger.
Yeah.
Game Pass, Game Pass, Game Pass. All these like, it just so happens that the games that are coming out right now are like that. Hard to run on Game Pass.
I mean,
things that we can't access.
I think you think a couple months ago, like we were talking about Game Pass in a way more critical light because I don't think they were delivering on consistent high quality experiences the way that they promised. Where they're like, there's going to be a must play game every quarter, and just like I don't really think that was super the case ever, unless you had a very, very wide palette. Right, if you like every game, then sure, maybe. But I think this year, right, the last 6 months we've been talking about, there's been some big bangers like consistently, right? You had Indiana Jones, you had Avowed, you have Expedition 33, you have Elder Scrolls, you have Doom today, Monster Hunter, right? Like it's a lot of games, and I think if you are somebody that is playing on ROG and you are like getting to play some of these games using Game Pass or whatever, then I that's a huge. We've always talked about how being able to play Game Pass games on Steam Deck would be a huge boon, but I think not having that option and also not being able to run some of these games, if you were willing to go and be like, I'll drop $70 on Doom, I want to play it on Steam Deck day one. Yeah, it's just not an option for you right now, and it's definitely unfortunate because I think it's easy to look back on that time when it was like Elden Ring is the game of the year, it's the game of the moment, and it runs in like immaculately on Steam Deck. And I think that there are many of us who are early adopters that long for that option again a little bit more, and I think, I mean,
we have to remember that a year ago we were maybe not you so much, but me and Steve were like 50 hours into Balatro on our Steam Decks. That was I would not have been able to play as much Balatro as if it wasn't for my Steam Deck.
No, and I think that's still the thing is like I we've gotten comments recently when we talk about this where it's like, oh, we're down on Steam Deck or whatever, and it's like we're not. It's just I think there was a point where the thing Steve was doing on his Steam Deck the most was playing AAA games, and now that's obviously not an option anymore. Whereas, like, for me, I've kind of always been like, I would rather play indies here. I play a lot of retro games on it. I play a lot of, like, ROM hacks and fan games and stuff on my deck because, if I'm going to play a AAA game that's, like, very much, like, pushing, the envelope, right? Like graphically or something like that, like something like, said like Claire Obscura is Expedition 33 is beautiful, right? I don't want to play a low resolution, low frame rate version of that. So considering I have a gaming rig and I have an Xbox, and a PlayStation, it's like, why wouldn't I just go play where it's the most performant and the best version of it that I can get, or the version of it that is like the most acceptable with the least compromises, right? Which is,
you do get a lot of like graphics don't matter. Why do you care so much about graphics if you were to sort of breach this kind of topic? But like also, it's not like you're complaining about the graphics not being good. You're sort of like you've watered down the vision of that game, the actual art direction of that game, so much to the point that it's jagged and you've got like filters over it, like FSR to get it to, all the stuff you've got, the compromises you've had to make lessen that game in a way that, because it's a visual art form, you're supposed to look at it. They've created it in such a way, and it's not like you can say, they've chosen that art style for a reason, because they haven't chosen that. You've made it look like that. You've had to go into the configuration file and turn off like the lumen ray tracing just to be able to run the game. It's like, well, that was designed around that. Maybe that's not a good example. I don't know. But you know what I mean.
But I think you're like, point being that like compromises are one thing, right? Because I think that there are like PC gamers that would argue that playing anything on deck is like, we've gotten that comment before, that it's like playing anything on deck is not worth it because my rig is so great and I want to play the best, most performant, prettiest version of the game. And that's totally legitimate, right? But I think there are just as many of us that like, for whom the form factor or the portability or the convenience or whatever, right, like is enough of a differentiator to make you play the game on deck or on console or wherever, right? And we're all willing to make a certain number of compromises somewhere. I think it's the question of like, at what point does that compromise start to negatively influence your experience with the game or your opinion of the game or what have you? And that's where I think it becomes a trade-off it's just not worth making anymore, right? And I think we're seeing that more and more in a world where I think the compromises we used to be asked to make were more reasonable. And it was like, okay, like I'll play the game in 40 FPS instead of 60, whatever, right? Like that's fine. But I think when you're getting to the point where like you're lowering resolution and you're getting to the point where it's like it doesn't, it just doesn't hit the way that it should, then
you're downloading a custom configuration file that's turned on settings you can't even actually change in the game to strip things out.
Yeah.
Like it becomes a whole like, you don't even have the option of just downloading it and then turning it down. You have to jump through a hoop of to be able to play this game. And it's like, is it worth it at that point when you just play it elsewhere? Is it worth it to play a handheld?
And I think probably not, right? But I think that's also like the nice thing about deck is that there are workarounds for those things. Like if you are willing to go through the trouble of setting up green light, if you do have a nice rig that you can stream from, like you can find ways around those things and still enjoy the experience. But I think obviously, like we said, right, you want to make those things as accessible to non-power users as possible.
Yeah, and I mean that's most of the audience, right?
Ideally,
not necessarily our audience, but that's most of the Steam Deck audience.
Yeah, I think that's primarily who the Steam Deck exists to bring into the ecosystem, So we'll wrap things up today with a quick PSA, because I'm sure this is a story that you've probably heard about, and if in case you maybe didn't see the resolution or you still weren't sure about how it all played out, we thought we would just quickly summarize things, because at this point it's hopefully everybody's kind of gotten the word that what's going on. But we had a leak of about 89 million users' data from Steam, and the leak include user records, and then like it's about like I said, 89 million files that were put up on like a ransom website where you could like bid on it for like $5,000 to get this user data. But it seems like a lot of the information was like 2FA text messages, one-time passcodes, mobile numbers. It doesn't seem like there was too much like very, very protected information included. Yeah,
it doesn't. So I can't remember how you worded them, but it's been bandied around as 89 million users' data has been taken, but that's not the case. It's 89 million files.
Yeah,
for a number of users, and it's not. So Steam have, I'm jumping ahead a little bit here, but Steam have come out and sort of responded to this, because people are saying Steam's been hacked, your data's been gone, you should change your password, blah, 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 blah. But that's not the case. Valve said it's not a breach of their systems. They're currently looking for the source of the leak. The codes that are, so if the leak is just one-time passcodes and mobile numbers, the codes by themselves are useless. They only last 15 minutes from the moment you request it. But whoever buys that data, and I think the data is just there for anyone to buy. You could buy it right now if you have $5,000. It's not necessarily a bidding war. It's just they want to sell as many copies of that as
interesting. Okay, I thought it was one copy.
No, I think you can there's just like, yeah, here's all the data. You can buy that from me because they want scammers to buy it, I guess.
Yeah, of course.
I'm pretty sure there was I read I should have put it on here, but a website I think bought it and looked through it to sort of see what was in there.
Gotcha.
So the important quotes here is leaked data did not associate phone numbers with a Steam account, password information, payment information, or other personal data. So they may have your mobile number, but they don't have access to your Steam account or anything like that.
Or any way to like identify you based on that.
Yes,
they just have a number.
Account. Yeah, so Steam has also said, or Valve has said, you do not need to change your password or phone numbers as a result of this event. We also recommend setting up Steam Mobile Authenticator if you haven't already. So I, as someone who uses Authenticator anyway, I just scan a QR code when I want to log in. Haven't even given this a second thought because even if they have my password, they ain't getting in.
No. Also, there are the other ways you can set up 2FA. Like there's you can have your phone number and they'll text you a code as one of the standard 2FA setups. Like that would be another way that like if somebody was trying to hack into your account, they would need the code that gets sent to your number. So, and granted, like if they had your number, right? Like there are like certain ways that you can like, you can like clone a number and like get information, but like it's like the point that Valve made here of like the fact that they're not able to associate it with your account, it really doesn't seem like there's much risk here of you running into any trouble. But just in general, as a PSA, it's worth setting up the Steam Mobile Authenticator app because it's very easy and it just gives you an extra layer of protection.
Yeah, I would. The official Steam Deck podcast stance here is don't worry.
I think the one thing that I would just potentially advise you to watch out for is phishing scams, right? Like or phishing scams.
Phishing scams.
Excuse me. You might end up, if your number got leaked, right, you might end up getting a disproportionate amount of like bot calls or other phishing attempts through text messages and stuff like that. So just, I would, you probably shouldn't worry, but just in general, don't respond to texts from numbers you don't know, things like that. Like always verify those kinds of things. I'm sure this is stuff that everybody knows, but I saw people in our Discord talking about it and some people freaking out online and stuff like that. So I thought it would be worth just taking a few minutes to just clearly kind of clean it up. And if anybody wasn't aware, now you know, and you can go and take that extra level of protection.
Use your best judgment. Don't be swayed by clickbait saying you've been hacked, blah, blah. You'll be all right.
Right. Yeah. Don't click on emails, links and emails from people you don't know, things like that.
Yeah.
It's internet basics, but we have listeners of all ages and we all get different, like our generation was very like taught to look out for this stuff. And I don't know how much that gets, so whatever. Right. We have a platform. I wanted to provide the PSA for you. Hopefully this helps somebody if they were freaked out or whatever. And if you use the Steam Mobile Authenticator, you'll have yourself protected for next time that something like this happens. Alrighty. Good work today, Max.
Good work to you too. This is ending of hour 3.5 of our time together today. Yeah,
we just streamed Super Metroid for 2 hours. That was a great time. You can go check out the VOD actually if you want to. That's live now. We're going to be streaming all month, doing some fundraising for the channel. So go and check it out if you haven't already. And we're going to be putting our schedule for the week up at like Sunday or Monday. So go and keep your eyes peeled for that, and maybe you can come catch one live. And it's something we're going to be making a habit of doing moving forward. So make sure you come and hang out. It'll be a good time. And, of course, while we're thanking people, I'm going to extend a very special thank you to our Patreon producers for the month of May. They are, of course, Arnold J. Rimmer, Christopher Valenz, Gabriel Hasselmeyer, a.k.a. Sobe, Project Julian, Steve Stompy, Susan Still Likes Cats and Also Boobies, Voodoo Vic, That One Kid Nick, Ty the Dude, and Wakahula. Thank you all so much for your support over on patreon.com/flipscreengames. Y'all the reals to the real, and we greatly appreciate your support of this and all of our sister shows. Remember, if you want to get in touch, you want to write in with your thoughts, you want to let us know what you thought about this week's show, and or check out those sister shows, Nintendo Noise, the Flip Screen Games podcast, join our Discord. You can do all that and much more by heading over to flipscreen.games. However you choose to get involved or show your support. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Steam Deck podcast. For the crew, I've been Pete, he's been Max. We'll see you next week.